Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Bombay Management Association's Friday Fundamental Series, which we launched in the month of May 2020. As we look back and walk the trip down memory lane, we realize that we've already completed 30 such webinars over the last 6 months. And we've been indeed blessed that we have a plethora of very senior professionals, consultants, academicians, industry leaders coming and sharing their insights on several aspects of business, man management, and of course, looking at how the entire economy, both Indian and the world, are set to grow sooner or later. Today, we are delighted that we have with us two very distinguished professionals coming across to us right from the United States of America. I'm delighted to welcome on all your behalf and say namaskar on behalf of every one of us at the Bombay Management Association. Let us welcome Sri Ramesh Rajagopalan and Douglas Gray on behalf of the entire BMA family. Namaste, Vanakkam, and welcome to India, though digitally. They are stalwarts in the field of business analytics and have done extremely good work in the field, both in the academic area in research and also in consulting with large organizations. They're part of a larger organization, SetCONNECT, which provides consultancy services across the world. And I'm delighted to share that they have also started their services in India for the benefit of industry and academia. And the person who has facilitated this entire journey for them to be part of India and provide services for us too is Mr. Murali Rao, who I think is well known as Murali Coach to many of his friends, as you can see in his title. As we are all set to celebrate Retail Day tomorrow, saying thank you to all those small and big shop owners, small and big retail chains, which took through us through these very difficult times when we were at home, they were working for us. Why I said all this in particular is Murli is better known as a doyen from the retail industry, has been in top leadership positions with the Future Group and then moved on to into consulting practice. A very passionate trainer, loves to share, get together with students, faculty, colleagues, and as a person, a knowledge disseminator of very great repute. Thank you so much, Murli, for bringing such distinguished panelists to our BMA Friday Fundamentals Forum. We are indeed honored with their presence, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you and hand over this session to you to lead the entire learning journey for this evening for the Bombay Management Association. Over to you, Murli.
Thank you, Professor Mani. Thank you for your kind words. I hope I live up to some of what you have said about me. Uh, Good evening, everyone, and good morning to our distinguished panelists from across, from overseas. It's my pleasure to be moderating this session. And over the next 1.5 hours, we'd like to bring to you different aspects of business analytics, as well as in terms of academic part of it, as well as the industry part. I'll come to the panelists and their formal introduction in a bit. Meanwhile, I just thought we'll start from what's going around us. You know, data is the new oil, they say. I like this because data and oil have many things in common. This analogy is apt because oil, we know in crude form, is trapped in the geological structures underneath the earth. Similarly, data in its raw form is also trapped in organization in different files, folders, formats, across geographies, across this thing. Though a lot of it is on the cloud, but a lot of useful data also resides in people's folders and files and so on and so forth in the context of what we're discussing today. We all know that making productive use of crude involves the process of identifying where the deposits are, extracting it, transporting it, refining it, right? Remembering my chemical engineering days, refining it, and making use of different fractions that come out of the distillation column in terms of gasoline and LPG and diesel and furnace oil and so on and so forth. Similarly, data that's trapped in any organization in different files, folders, etc., which are separated by barriers of technology, function, turf, so on and so forth, need to be consolidated, cleaned, wrangled, put together, and tools and techniques used on them so that they are able to be productive and useful to the organization in whole. I find this comparison also particularly useful because today we are in a position where most of the companies are data rich but insights poor. Why does it happen? CEOs and managers, senior managers are always demanding information and insights from their teams. They're pointing to mountains of data that are getting collected on a day-to-day basis. Professor Mani spoke about retail, where I spent a lot of time. It's a reality. It was a reality a few years back. It continues to be a reality today. A lot of data is getting collected. The IT function, the marketing function, or the business intelligence function, if it is there, it's there in some companies, they're not able to comprehend how to bridge this gap between what is demanded and what actually they have with them or what they have been equipped with. It's not surprising because functional teams lack the skill to extract data and to design models to solve business problems. Just like we would not dream of taking a bucket of crude oil if it were to be available to us, putting a match to it and trying to, extract energy out of it in a usable form. Why is it then that when we have this data trapped in raw data, the pool of data, which is available in any organization, we expect to give some primitive tools to the people who are handling it and then expect them to generate insights and information, etc. for us. So if you just compare these two, there's something which is missing. And I think that's what we need to focus on today. And our panelists are eminently qualified, more than qualified, to be able to give us perspectives and their viewpoints in this very, very important aspect. Akin to technology, technologies which are petroleum engineering and chemical engineering that help us extract, refine, etc., that I spoke about, there's an entire ecosystem that has been built in the field of business analytics over the last 2 decades, maybe decade and a half, that its own technologies, tools, templates, more important practices that help individuals and organizations handle a large quantity of data, a large volume of data in a productive manner, in a systematic manner, and get some useful outputs, outcomes, and insights out of it. Therefore, the purpose of today's session actually is to look at that gap and get an understanding of that, is to help managers across different functions, different levels, to get an understanding of what this data business analytics is all about. What is the definition, what it's all about. Relate to a few use cases that the panelists will be sharing with us. And also understand the steps and challenges. It's more than just, getting a subscription to a set of software tools and then just dumping it on the business intelligence team or MIS team, right? And telling them, hey, you know what, use this. Yeah, I've given you everything that you want, but it's much more than that. It's about institutionalization of business analytics in organizations. And that's really the challenge that we see. In some ways, it is akin to what happened with information technology industry, maybe 3 or 4 decades back, but it's going to happen much more rapidly in the case of business analytics, from a set of experts doing it right to the desktop and all users, whether of different functions, organizations, NGOs, etc., government using it. We shall see the transition, it's already happening. So in today's session, we'd like to look at the definition of business analytics, use cases, as well as the steps and the challenges that are there when you institutionalize business analytics in organizations. It's not only for managers and this thing, it's also for people who are getting into a career right now, right? You can't do without data sciences and business analytics, whether you're an engineer in one way or whether you're a chartered accountant in another way, or whether you're a management student in the third, right? We all know that data sciences and business analytics is a skill that is required by organizations as they start dealing with more and more data. So it's my pleasure today to introduce the two panelists who are there with us, right? And while on a lighter note, it's worthwhile saying that these two gentlemen are in Texas, USA, which is the home to the oil industry, yeah, of the USA. And we're talking about data and oil and so on and so forth. So warm welcome to both of you. And I would like to introduce them briefly. Dr. Ramesh Rajagopalan is the CEO and founder of SetCONNECT Incorporated, which is incorporated in Texas. Ramesh is a versatile leader with more than 3 decades of experience. And it's not just experience, but it's also a unique blend of experience in business analytics, supply chain management, big data, and cloud solutions. Ramesh has more than 2 decades of experience driving business value of US dollars 200 million annually using advanced analytics techniques. So he's done a lot of work in industry as well. In addition to that, Ramesh has also successfully directed a global master's in business analytics program at McCombs School of Business at University of Texas in Austin. And he has led the team to take it from wherever it was to number 2 position across all the business analytics, MS business analytics programs in the US. So we'd like to welcome Ramesh. Ramesh, thank you so much for joining us. And we'd like to, of course, hear your perspectives as we go on. Douglas Gray, welcome, Doug. Doug is senior executive leader specializing in integrating data and analytics into corporate strategy across the enterprise to achieve measurably impactful, sustainable, competitive advantage. Doug has considerable expertise in leading large-scale programs involving sophisticated business systems design, delivery execution, and operations, leveraging analytics, data science, business intelligence, and IT to generate significant tangible economic value and business impact across a variety of industries: airlines, travel and hospitality, healthcare, financial services, all of which are very heavy users. Healthcare, especially with COVID, of course, but all these are fairly heavy users of business analytics. He's held several leadership positions in organizations including Southwest and Walmart. Doug has an MBA from Southern Methodist University and has an MS in OR, Operations Research, from Georgia Institute of Technology, Georgia Tech. He's also currently an adjunct professor of business analytics in SMU. So, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, on your behalf, a warm welcome to both the panelists. Thank you for taking time to address us. Yeah. All right. The way we have set out this webinar is that it's in 3 parts. The first part, I'll ask individual opening questions to both the panelists to get their perspective. The next part, the second part, is about a set of 3 or 4 questions, which I would ask both the panelists to respond to. And the third part, obviously, is where you, as participants, would like to ask them questions which have not been answered, or you'd like some clarification, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So without much ado, I'd like to get on to the first question. The first question is to Dr. Ramesh Rajagopalan, right? Ramesh, business analytics is a term that one hears so often nowadays. So let's start at the beginning. Yeah, I'm sure it's being used, abused, misused, misinterpreted, what have you, and I've heard you off and on speak about this. There seems to be a lack of common understanding of what it means, right? Could you please, for our benefit, give us a working definition of the term business analytics and some examples of its application? We have about 10 minutes or so. Ramesh, over to you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, BMA, for giving us this platform and the opportunity, and Professor Mani for graciously putting all this together. And of course, all of you participants taking time out of your families on a Friday evening, really appreciate your commitment. And of course, thank the moderator for preparing and organizing and structuring this discussion here today. So Murali, you asked about analytics definition, business definition of business analytics. You know, I teach classes, so most of the time I share a very, very basic definition of what business analytics really is. And in my mind, business analytics is it's a scientific process of transforming data into insight, right? So it's a scientific process of transforming data into insight for making better decisions. In its simplest form, this is, if we are doing this at any organization, at any level, right? So we are actually using analytics or business analytics in our domain of work. So it's first of all, it's a process, but I would say a scientific process. And the objective is to transform data into some kind of an insight. That insight then can be used to make decisions. And I typically take it one level further. Why do we take decisions? Why do we make decisions as managers, as contributors, as executives, and so on? You make decisions to drive value, right? If you're not driving value to the business, to your organization, to your department, then what you're doing with all those processes of transforming data, insight, and all of that is probably not going to be of relevance, right? So always keep that end goal of adding some value to the business, whether it's cost reduction, improving profits, or better managing your customer in a measurable way, and so on, right? So that's as basic as I would start with. And I would also add a sort of a additional comment about the definition is we have to be careful what it is not, right? Doug and I talk about this all the time, and we have had a number of discussions, and I'm sure I've talked with many of our colleagues, including yourself, Murali, what it is not. It is not setting up a data warehouse in an organization wherein you do occasionally do some queries and pull some data and say, hey, you know, I'm using it for making decisions, right? That is really not business analytics. It definitely is not reports and dashboards, oftentimes generated in the name of business intelligence, right? Business analytics is not that either. It is not just reports and dashboards, which are typically you're looking in your rearview mirror and trying to go forward, right? So it's useful. You got to occasionally look at your rearview mirror, but that's not the one that's going to propel you forward. And again, I tell my folks at, you know, I used to work at Dell for almost a decade. You know, don't tell me that you use this SQL query and ad hoc, you pull some data, put some filter, and say, here is how I came up with a list of targets that we need to go after in this particular product. That's not business analytics either. There's a lot more structured way to do that. And so rule of thumbs and so on, which oftentimes we kind of get, you know, into because that's our habits, right? So all of these things are not business analytics. So it is a scientific process of transforming data into insight to make better decisions, and the better decisions lead you to drive value within your organization. Now, I talked about process, right? So Murali, tell me when my time runs out. I've been a professor, so I I get started, and it's very hard for me to stop. And as you might find with most of the professors. Right?
No, you have time. You have time.
And Doug also is, in a way, he's also a professor. So, but I think he does a better job of managing time than I do. But I said process, right? So in this process, if you really think about our daily lives, we are interacting with a lot of things that actually make use of business analytics. So what is the process? The process is simply to, when I say insights, it's about finding patterns and features in your data. And typically today it means large amounts of data, but it doesn't have to be large as long as it is a problem-centric data, data that supports your solution to a particular business problem. You have the task of finding patterns and finding the right features in the data in making decisions and predictions about potential future events, right? So that's kind of what you see in a lot of the apps that you are dealing with, and they all use algorithms. Algorithms in this context, you could view this as some sequence of statistical processing steps, or processing steps based on statistics or math. When I earlier said scientific process, the science that I'm kind of referring to here is statistics, if you can call it science, but statistics, mathematics, computer science, those are the scientific process that I'm referring to. So these applications of business analytics use algorithms or statistical processing steps to find patterns in data, and they make informed decisions, right? So if you think about it in your daily lives, if you're going to Amazon Prime or Netflix, you are actually interacting with a business analytics application by way of recommendation engines, right? So it keeps track of all the things that you're doing, clicking through, and then finding a behavior based on that, and says, hey, you are watching this movie. Based on my recommendation engine, I'm going to recommend this as your next potential movie to watch. What's happening behind? There's an algorithm. There's a sequence of processing steps, statistical processing steps. And we actually teach these things in our courses. We do conduct lots of courses for working professionals. What's going on behind these kinds of engines? The recommendation engine, affinity analysis, collaborative filtering, supervised learning, unsupervised learning, all these kinds of concepts, we kind of break it down and actually show how you can build and use these kinds of applications. And Murali asked about use cases. You go type in a word in Google to look for some information. What's going on there? Again, there's a lot of analytics behind it, right? So the search engines, and you may have a iPhone. You may say, hey, Siri, go get me something. Actually, my phone is responding right now. So they are listening to you all the time, right? So there is an algorithm sitting there in your phone, in the processor, which then goes and, once you say this certain magic words, it activates itself and then does what you're asking it to do. And the ones that are now coming up, self-driving cars, there's a lot of number crunching and a lot of analytics behind it, right? So closer to your workplace, whether you are in a pharmaceutical company or a retail, Professor Mani talked about retail. I guess it's a retail day. Whether it's retail or manufacturing-based companies, you have marketing. Typically, when you look at marketing, you want to retain your customers, and if you can apply some analytics and gain some intelligence on the customers that are likely to churn, again, we can apply techniques to find that out, the probability of churn, and then classify them. And if you have that information, then you can provide marketing treatments to keep them, saving you a lot of money. If you lose them, to win them over, it's going to cost you 3, 4, 5 times, right? So marketing, this is a major problem. Propensity modeling. figuring out who are the most likely, have the highest propensity to buy my product, and then go target your products to them. These are kind of things that we have done very successfully when under my direction at Dell, and saved the company a lot of our, we hit the revenue, made a revenue impact of several $1 million. And if you're operating in an operations environment, supply chain, demand forecasting, physical cyber system interactions. Today, every machinery is embedded with IoT kind of devices, which constantly collecting data, phoning home. They are just phoning the data into your systems, and how you can analyze them using analytics methods and make decisions based on, about the production, maintenance, capacity management, all those kinds of things, right? So these are absolutely use cases that you see all around us. The ones who are successfully doing this are the ones who are leaping forward, right? I think I'll stop there, and back to you, Murali.
No, thanks, Ramesh. So you've spoken about the scientific process of transforming data into insights to help better decision making, and you spoke about the process. I spoke about finding patterns, and you spoke about the mathematics and computer science and other things which are the disciplines which are used to arrive at this. And you gave examples, whether it is Google or whether it is Netflix or many of these examples. And you also spoke about people in manufacturing or pharma or many of these industries who can benefit from this. No, thanks for that. Of course, we'll build on this as we go along. I'll now turn to Doug. Doug, this today's webinar is really about business analytics being a strategic tool for business growth. Now, you've had a terrific amount of experience, first-hand experience in doing this kind of work with fairly large pioneering organizations. Could you give us examples of how business analytics has been used to achieve strategic business goals versus used in a function for getting some insight in one consumer, a small part of marketing? So how is it being used enterprise-wise to drive strategic goals? Over to you, Doug.
Absolutely. Thank you, Murali. I appreciate that. And thank you, everyone, for attending. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I will give you one corollary to your theory earlier that data is the new oil. If data is the new oil, I believe that analytics is the refinery that transfers data into a variety of types of business value, just as your analogy and your metaphor talked about. So I like that. My particular experience in industry has been in 3 fields predominantly. So I've spent 15 total years in the airline business. I did spend 1 very intensive year leading analytics at a $2 billion healthcare insurance company. And now I find the great fortune to be at the world's biggest and one of our greatest retailers, Walmart. And I'll give you some examples of the power of analytics from those 3 industries. So I think one of the common misconceptions about analytics is this is all new. Well, that's partly true, but also partly false. Analytics has been around under other names and other fields like operations, research, and statistics literally since the 1940s and 50s, believe it or not. And what's changed is, as Ramesh alluded to, the volume of data that we have available from IoT, from mobile phones, websites, the plethora of hundreds of enterprise systems that we have available, the compute power that we have that's now manifested in high-performing chipsets like GPUs, graphical processing units, which have 100 times the power of typical historical Intel chips, for example. And then new methods, even methods that have been invented since I went to school 30 years ago in machine learning. The first paper in machine learning was written in 1959, believe it or not. So these concepts have been around. And I'll use one example from the airline industry from the 1990s that was an award-winning example, which is the field of revenue management. Some people may know that as pricing and yield management, but it is the art and science by which an airline controls its inventory and the prices that it charges. So in most basic context, an airline has an inventory of seats, let's say 100 seats on an airplane. And if we sell all of our seats at low fares, we've lost the opportunity to garner higher revenue for people that are willing to pay more. But if we wait for those higher paying customers to show up, we may lose the opportunity to sell a seat at a lower cost and just cover the cost of one seat. This capability was developed at American Airlines back in the 1980s. It's a very rich, very sophisticated set of predictive analytic tools by which we need to forecast customer demand by flight leg, by seat or fare class. And we also have to forecast cancellation rates and forecast no-shows. And so we can set what are called overbooking levels, because if we just take 100 reservations and 20 people don't show up, then we've lost the opportunity to sell those 20 seats. So we'll sell 120 tickets knowing that 20 people roughly aren't going to show up so we can fill the airplane. There's also an optimization side to that. How do we optimize the structure of the pricing bucket so that we can maximize revenue subject to demand and subject to the availability of seats on the aircraft? So as Ramesh alluded, this is a scientific process for allocating seats on an aircraft to inventory classes. And what makes this even more complicated is that's changing over time. It's actually a dynamic stochastic optimization problem because fares are changing as competitors rise or increase or decrease prices. We also have demand patterns that change. And an airline has to publish their schedule a year in advance, believe it or not. But 50% of the tickets are sold within 60 days of the day of departure. So this is a very complex, very sophisticated problem and solution developed at American Airlines in the 80s. And I'll give you the business benefit, which is really what everybody wants to know. In general, revenue management can increase your revenue 4 to 6%. And in the case of American Airlines, year over year, from 1988, 1989, and 1990, we were able to generate an incremental $1.4 billion in revenue on an annual run rate that, let's say, was about $16 billion. So that's about a 4 to 6% improvement in revenue. And this solution was so significant in its impact that in 1991, American Airlines won the prestigious Edelman Prize, which is offered by an organization called INFORMS, the Institute for Operations Research and Management Science. And the Edelman Award is effectively the Nobel Prize for operations research, which would be known today as analytics. So revenue management clearly is one of the most potent business applications. It's generated significant business value and now is not only used by every airline in the world, but anybody that has a perishable commodity, a hotel room, a cruise line berth, a seat on a passenger railway, or a freight car that carries freight. Even self-storage facilities are now using this because they all have the same problem. If I don't fill that space and time passes, that's a day that I don't have the opportunity to generate revenue. In my particular experience at Southwest Airlines, one of my significant projects that I worked on was in the area of fuel management. An airline spends about 30% of its revenue every year on fuel. $6 billion in the case of Southwest Airlines on $20 billion in fuel. And at the time in 2015, when I arrived, the company was still using Excel spreadsheets to manage that fuel inventory. And Southwest is famous for using hedging, Black-Scholes, which is a very analytical technique in its own right, to manage its fuel, but it wasn't doing anything on what we call tactical hedging, of trading off the operational bias of not wanting to run out of fuel or a shortage cost with the holding cost. We have to purchase it, we have to store it, we have to guard it, we have to maintain the tank farms that hold that fuel. And we were able to put in place a series of 3 different solutions. forecasting our demand more accurately using machine learning techniques. So we could forecast literally how much fuel we were going to need at each of 100 airports every month of the year. And that fed into an annual aggregate forecast that we could go to the major fuel suppliers, Exxon, Chevron, Kinder Morgan, and tell them how much demand we were going to need for their fuel products at each of our airports. And they could place bids in an RFP process to make sure that we were getting the lowest cost for our fuel per gallon. And then we used an optimizer, a mathematical program, a mixed integer program, to actually select the vendor that had the best track record of delivering fuel at the lowest cost and meet all of our demand at all 100 airports at minimum cost. We were then able to implement what's traditionally known as EOQ, Economic Order Quantity Model. Basically, that tells us, how do we balance the cost of purchasing, shortage cost, and holding cost on a tactical basis, given that we've got a finite capacity in the form of tanks, fuel tanks to store our fuel. And there again, we have to forecast the demand that's happening within the month. We have to factor in lead times. And these are the problems that an airline faces when it comes to fuel management. At the end of the day, conservatively, we were saving about 0.3% of our fuel bill each year. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it's still in the millions of dollars, right? On 6 billion. It's about 18 million a year on average. And that's money that can then be freed up and used for other purposes. I mentioned that I worked in the healthcare industry, and as Murali mentioned, that is an area that is rich with opportunity, mainly in the field of predicting patient outcomes. As Murali mentioned, I teach business analytics at SMU. One of my students was an orthopedic surgeon, and in the course of the class, he was able to do a project to predict the likelihood that a patient would readmit to the hospital after having orthopedic surgery, let's say a hip replacement. Readmission is a major expense for hospitals these days. Every dollar that goes into a readmitted patient that readmits 1, 2, or 3 times, that is borne by the hospital, and effectively 1 or more readmissions can wipe out all of the profit that a hospital would garner from a particular procedure. And by factoring in features or variables like the patient's age, their age, their gender, their ability to be taken care of at home by a spouse or a home care worker, and then also by using IoT devices to measure things like respiratory performance, temperature that might indicate an infection. All these things combined, physical technology combined with predictive analytics, he was able to predict with 90+% accuracy the likelihood that a given patient with a certain set of criteria was going to readmit. And that enabled the hospital to then focus in on those patients that were at the highest risk of readmission and take care of those patients and make sure that they had the right level of care to avoid the readmission. For his particular hospital, in 1 year, that avoided about $500,000 in cost, in readmission costs, conservatively. It probably could have been more than that, but it was significant. As Ramesh mentioned, these techniques can be used across the board. It's really a combination of mathematics, statistics, data engineering, and some programming. But it really doesn't matter what industry you're in. As a matter of fact, one of my other students that I worked with, he was a deputy superintendent of a steel mill. The steel mill was losing money. They had a policy of make to stock, where they were making a lot of products that frankly people weren't buying, and they were building a lot of inventory. They took a closer look at their demand signal to see exactly what products their customers wanted to buy. They reoriented their product mix. They then optimized the flow of the steel mill to produce those products most efficiently. They shifted to a make-to-order strategy, and using a combination of demand forecasting and linear programming, a classical application of linear programming to product mix optimization, a student doing a class project was able to increase the profitability of their steel mill by 23%. So these are just a few of the examples that I've encountered both in my time as a professional in the airline business and in healthcare, as well as a professor at SMU. And I'll reserve some of the other examples from Walmart and other places for later in the presentation. But hopefully that gives you an idea that analytics truly is economically transformational. And it requires the right combination of people with the right skills, which we'll talk about, process, and discipline in applying these techniques and following the process all the way through from modeling to a production implementation, so that these systems just run in the background, no differently than SAP or Salesforce or other systems that you may have in your enterprise. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Murali for the next round of questions.
No, thanks, Doug. I think you have very clearly linked up the impact of the work done on business analytics in different areas, revenue management, and you spoke about in airlines as well as fuel management, and you showed about transition from Excel kind of a thing. I think a lot of organizations are in that phase today in India. We sort of think Excel is an excellent tool, but we think that it is analytics, so whatever comes out of Excel, it's not about the tool actually, it's about its usage. Otherwise, it's an excellent tool. You also spoke about healthcare, very, very interesting case of prediction of readmission and how to avoid that. Yeah. And you spoke about lastly about the steel mill, which is very, very relevant because people keep asking. These are all great examples of great airlines, etc. But in my manufacturing unit, in my this thing, how can I use it? So thanks for sharing that, Doug, it's truly across industries. And also more important, it's not a particular function. You have connected it to the objectives of the organization in terms of revenue, costs, and their biggest problem in case of hospital, which is readmission costs. So thanks for sharing that. Now I move on to, there'll be some follow-up questions of obviously the participants will be asking, because you've raised some things about, it's not true that everything is new as far as business analytics is concerned, and not everything is old either, but I think somebody will pick that up later. Now, my next set of questions are to both of you. And I would like you to take about 5 minutes each to answer, to give your response. I'll ask obviously one question at a time. What is the role of business analytics in driving value in an organization, right? You gave examples, both of you have given some examples. Now, value in an organization could mean different things. One part of it is, of course, to do with the revenue and costs and so on and so forth. So could you share your experience on this part? Specifically, we keep hearing about this data-driven decision-making. All the time we keep hearing about this data-driven decision-making. So for the sake of our participants and all of us, can you share some examples of what is this data-driven decision-making and what's the connect of business analytics to driving value and data-driven decision? So I'd like to come to you, Ramesh, first, right? And then I would request Doug to do that. So over to you, Ramesh.
We'll defer the best to the last, so we'll wait for Doug's later. So, I certainly would go back to the process. The question really here is, how do you drive value in an organization, particularly with the data-driven decision-making culture? I think that's what, if I heard it correctly, those are the two aspects of your question. So, again, if you step back and think about why are we doing all this? What is analytics, and what's a function of analytics and data in an organization, right? So how does it add value? Really, our task is to come to an understanding that we have to look at the data that's available today, that's in our disposal, and objective has to be to figure out how to create insights from the data. And that insights, again, I go back to that fundamental aspect, that insights then help you to make certain decisions. Now, you can take all decisions as you want, but unless you tie that into some kind of a value, that you are able to document within your organization, that should be so sort of the a driving force behind all this, right? And when you talk about data-driven decision making, it is all about, hey, let's take a customer as an example, marketing function or a CRM organization, right? I collect a lot of data, just by transacting with the customers. There's a lot of information that's coming through in those transactions. And every company, even small, big, medium, all kinds of companies, when they are transacting with customers, they are collecting data. Whether it's in a paper form or in a database or whatever form, you do have data that's coming through. Now, what do I do with it? There are some things out there that you could actually gain by carefully analyzing the data. So how well do I do that? That's that should be the question that should be in everybody's mind, right? So that is kind of what I mean by data driven. Your organization becomes data driven. You give a strategic importance to the data that you have at your disposal, and you make everyone kind of think about how do I best make use of this data. Now, one quick example I may give in my own, I was in a marketing organization, in a company reporting to the organization under the chief marketing officer. And we, as a marketing function, we work with the CRM who run campaigns, and they have campaign objectives quarter to quarter. And our job in a marketing analytics organization was to provide that, look at the data, analyze the data, and provide a list of classified these customers or prospects into the top decile prospects, and then recommend that to the CRM teams to use that in their campaigns, because we believe, based on analytics that we have done, the models have shown that that these are the ones that is going to be most likely to buy a product that we are running a campaign for. So the business need is to identify the likelihood of that group buying a product. And then our question is, who are those with the highest propensity to purchase this product? Can I put them in can I classify them? Can I rank order them? And then identify the top decile, and then recommend that to the CRM teams. So they can embed that into their CRM tools and so on, and target them in their campaigns, right? So what is sort of the analytics we have done in here? We built propensity models. These are binary classification models. If you want to get more sophisticated, they are called machine learning models, supervised learning models, right? So we have a catalog of models for different products and different segments and different geographies and so on. So the model then determines the likelihood of purchase, and it scores the customers based on the likelihood of purchase, rank orders them. So we hand it over to them. And then what do we do with that? Well, they run the campaign, and then we put measurement systems in place to see which ones actually turned into paying customers quarter to quarter. We measured that. We hand this list, have them run the campaign, and then we watch them. We document them. And then the ones who convert, we dollarize that and report that on a quarterly basis to the CMO, right? So this is an example of data-driven decision-making, and data-driven decision-making that cuts across organizations from marketing to CRM, and perhaps even the product teams were involved. So it's a collective effort by various groups of people with common objectives, measurements, and reporting that back to the leadership. and document what we have gotten. And I might just add and saying, that systematic effort actually made into one of Michael Dell's blog articles. And so I revealed the company now, but they saw they actually saw the value in all of these things, right? So
no, thanks, Ramesh. I think that was again, for us as participants, we are seeing a pattern now in the responses. One is that business analytics is strategic in the sense it can add value in and specific terms, business goals like revenue or costs on one side. You gave an excellent example right now. Doug spoke about earlier the three things that summarized. You gave an excellent example of marketing and CRM, right, and product. So, and all these and how it helped in that domain of marketing. I think we are missing quite a bit of us miss that out because we see it in silos. So one of the things that's coming through with the responses so far is look at it across. Don't look at it in just a silo, functional silo, if you want to make use of business analytics. And we'll build on that. That brings me to the second question, actually. Since March, all of us have been virtually across the world, have been sort of, we've had to make major changes in the way we work and we live, etc. Obviously, businesses have got impacted. I just needed a response. Sorry, Doug, I'm sorry. Doug?
Yeah.
Yeah, I need you to respond to the first question, I'm sure. Yeah, about the driving value in an organization. I'm extremely sorry. Yeah, I
no problem. Very good. Sure, I understand. So, as you just mentioned, and it was a great segue, I think it's important to realize that analytics should not be looked at in a silo. It needs to be closely integrated with other areas of the business. Specifically, not just a particular domain. Ramesh talked about marketing. I talked about an example of marketing for revenue management. I also talked about fuel management, which is operations. I think a close linkage between analytics and finance is very important, and I'll tell you why. The point of every single analytics project should have a target. And people ask me, my students ask me all the time, what is a target? And a target really is identified by looking at your business, looking at your strategy, looking at your financial statements, income statement, cash flow statement in particular, and identifying an opportunity which may manifest in the form of a problem. For example, we're all business leaders. You're all trained in business, and you have MBAs, and I teach my MBA students to look at your business and look at your financial statements through the lens of analytics to say, what is a target that I should aim my analytics activity at, right? So in the case of an airline, if you look at an airline's income statement, there's revenue on the top line, and then the two major cost components of an airline are fuel, that's $6 billion on $20 billion in revenue, and crew, $9 billion. And that's pilots and flight attendants, right? So that's $15 billion worth of your revenue that's consumed right off the bat. If you're a retailer like Walmart and you look at your income statement for any retailer, not just Walmart, any retailer, cost of goods sold and the cost to transport and handle and manage that inventory from a supplier to a distribution center to a store, believe it or not, in Walmart's case, we're a publicly traded company. Our CEO, Doug McMillan, recently said, cost of goods sold and transportation and handling is 70% of every single dollar, right? So right there on our income statement gives us an opportunity to say, what can we do to make our supply chain more economically efficient? People would argue that Walmart has one of the most operationally effective supply chains in the world in terms of its scale and its scope. But we're always striving to make it more economically efficient. What can we do to pare down that 70% of cost of goods sold and transportation and handling and inventory costs, right? I challenge my students and I challenge, clients that I've worked with to look at their business, look at their strategy. What are we trying to achieve? Where are our big problems? Where are our big opportunities? Perhaps, as Ramesh mentioned, we have a problem with our telco company with our wireless customers churning, for example. Churn and losing customers and having to regain a new customer is extraordinarily expensive. It's been proven that you can look at a customer, the wireless plan that they have, the type of phone that they have, other demographic information like net income, net worth. You can look at all these. You can look at how many times they call the customer service desk, how many complaints that they filed. Are they a late payer on their bill for 1, 2, 3 months in a row? If you look at all that data in the aggregate across all of your customers and identify the ones that churn, you can predict with an accurate probability of which ones are going to churn that perhaps you need to make an offer. Perhaps you need to remit 1 month's payment, or you need to give a discount or give a free upgrade on a new phone or something to keep that customer that would far offset the cost of having to acquire a new customer. So I think business value from analytics comes when analytics is applied to specific targets that are identified in conjunction with business department owners, finance, and we look at our income statement, we look at our cash flow statement, we see where the money is draining out of the bottom of the enterprise, and that's where we can focus analytics as an example.
Thank you, Doug. I think you've laid out the process and how to identify opportunities, how to find opportunities for adding value through analytics. And you made some very, very important observation about the target part of it and about connecting it completely with the business objectives. You spoke about churn, you spoke about airlines, you spoke about Walmart as well, the different industries. Thank you for that. I think the bottom line, as I understand from the responses, is that you need to start connecting it to business, not just to functions. You need to start connecting it to business objectives and this thing. And that's when you start seeing value and start seeing returns come. Maybe that's a pointer for many of us who are struggling with trying to figure out how to take business analytics and get some good returns from that and make us more competitive. Thank you. Thank you for your response, both of you. I move on to the next thing, which I had started saying, got interrupted, but it's about, very simply put, in this COVID and post-COVID environment. Answer is intuitively obvious, but what do you see the role of business analytics specifically in this environment, in contributing to dealing with this environment? Any thoughts? Yeah, anything? Okay, Doug, you'd like to start first? Yep.
Sure.
I'll come to Ramesh.
So in the world of analytics and events, COVID in particular is something that we would call what's known as a black swan event. Right. There's actually a book by that name about these cataclysmic, one-time, practically for all intents and purposes, unpredictable events. Nobody could have foreseen that. A handful of people saw the mortgage crisis and financial crisis back in 2008. The movie The Big Short talks about that in particular, people that were able to see those types of impending disasters coming, but very, very rarely. So we consider those black swans. I think that the role that analytics can play is multifold in this. And in some cases, we have had to reset demand forecasting. When you're forecasting demand according to normal patterns of seasonality and holidays that occur throughout the years in different demographic areas, and certain events that we have, a lot of these demand patterns, some have been increased dramatically and others have been decreased dramatically. So we see things like travel for leisure and business have decimated the airlines and dramatically decreased their demand patterns. Once we have a new signal, a new demand signal, analytics can help to dramatically retrofit capacity. So in the case of airlines, when their demand signal is moving along at a normal pace, and then all of a sudden it drops off, airlines then have to retrofit their capacity by grounding aircraft, potentially by furloughing staff. And these are very painful decisions to make. And I'm intimately familiar with the airline business, but I never lived through COVID. I left Southwest in 2019. Similarly, in the retail industry, we have to reset demand forecasts. Some items, as we've noticed, like paper products and cleansers and hair dye and things like that, when people can't go to a salon or get their personal care taken care of, they start doing these things at home, right? So all of a sudden, we have to effectively reset our demand forecast so we can retrofit our supply chain. But there is no panacea to that. And you noticed, obviously, major grocery chains having outages of particular products. There's no way that a supply chain that's used to producing at a certain level can all of a sudden do 10 or 100x. Frankly, there's not enough capacity. But I think of all the companies in the world, I'm very fortunate to work for one that did dramatically, respond, then reset demand, reset supply, and reset supplier expectations to try and meet the demand. But I don't think that there's no one size fits all, but we can start collecting data in the new world order post Black Swan event to get an idea of what products we're selling more, what products we're selling less. And that goes for airlines, that goes for hotels, that goes for retailers. And then we can re-optimize our capacity accordingly. And that can be in a variety of ways. One thing that Walmart has done is we've set up temporary distribution centers, not only for COVID, but for the holidays. Walmart has set up COVID testing stations in our parking lots. Now we're going to start offering vaccines in our stores. So that's a whole new dimension of our supply chain that we, again, have to forecast the demand at each store location, and then do our best to provide ample capacity, for those. But I think it's not obvious what data and analytics can do. But again, when you look at your business through the lens of analytics, and typically every problem that we encounter has two parts to it. It's a hybrid. It has a stochastic dynamic part that we have to address with a predictive tool. And then there is a prescriptive part where we can address with an optimization tool to optimize the outcome. So predict what outcomes are likely with what probability, and then optimize whatever capacity it is that we're offering, airline seats, hotels, or productive capacity, for a retailer. But there's no doubt that analytics can add value and provide insight to the new data that comes after the Black Swan event.
Thanks for saying that. And I think, I'd like to go over to Ramesh for his response, about the role that it can potentially play.
There's not much I can add to what Doug has said. Okay. I think I completely agree with what he is saying. He's actually living it. He's actually seeing it, working at one of the major retailers. But I might just simply add that, the adoption of analytics and the recognition of analytics as a strategic weapon in our organization started, the executives realized that even pre-pandemic, right? That's so there's a rapid growth in adoption, and they were able to deliver significant economic value by using analytics, and that acceleration will only speed up now. I mean the analytics it's only going to accelerate even more, right? What we can understand now post-pandemic, are not quite there yet post-pandemic, but as we are going through this phase, time is a luxury leaders do not have. Right? That's what we're realizing. Some examples that Doug pointed out, they are making decisions as we go, whether it's bringing a vaccine supply chain, rapidly, or, recalibrating the shelf with the different products because the demand is shifted. So these are the things that, if any, we see analytics adoption is going to get even more faster and gain more acceleration. Supply chain, for example, reconfiguring the supply chain and disruptions. Maybe there are capabilities that we have to look at, or even crisis intervention. The strategies where maybe as part of the analytics function, one has to kind of keep all the scenario planning. What if this, what if that? Even that scenario may include black swan events. And so those kind of things are if any, I think it is analytics sort of gained even more of an important role coming out of this pandemic. That brings you have to have the analytics agility, analytic speed, and it's becoming a necessity for organizations, right?
Okay,
so that's
no, thanks.
that's kind of what I can add to it.
No, thanks. So two things I'm getting out of this. One is the fact that analytics can be used, right? It's not about advantage, disadvantage. So one perspective is that it can be used, and the example of vaccine and Walmart and so on and so forth is alive, and Doug is living through that, right? So it helps in some ways if you have the discipline. That's what I understood, the unsaid thing. If there is a discipline, there is a process, use the same channels to collect information. You need more information to reset demand, as Doug put it. And you're also talking about the fact that adoption of analytics, business analytics as a discipline, is you're likely to see that it's going to go up as companies start saying that they need to get better informed and know more about their environment around. I guess that's what it is. And of course, we are not through with it yet. So I'm sure there's a lot of work going on. It will come out in the months to come. We'll get a lot of case studies and use cases, etc. My next question is to do with education, right? There is a gap, obviously, between what is being demanded by senior management and CEOs, right, and what is actually being supplied. And we've seen that that gap over and over again, articulated differently. What is your opinion, or what's your perspective on what's the kind of education that is required within the by organizations, right? Whether it's a senior management team, right, or the skills that are required to build, one, the culture of database decision making, and second is actually the hard skills that are required by people to be able to extract and make data available. So the question is in two parts, actually, but addressing essentially education and this thing which is required. So Ramesh, would you like to take that up first?
Yeah, I mean, it's a favorite topic. I'm sure it's a favorite topic for all of us. When it comes to education, whether it is working professionals, as many of our audience here, or the traditional career-seeking graduates of colleges and so on, we can see some common patterns as far as analytics is concerned, right? Yeah. In the work environment, we have to focus on building skills that will help the contributors, the employees, to build some capabilities. And those capabilities, I see, one is clearly to expand the ability to operate in a entirely digital environment. I mean, we have all been locked into our homes, and still, businesses function, and we have to continue to work and so on. So operate in that fully digital environment becomes an important capability. Now, in that, specific to analytics, understanding of data, understanding of data concepts, process that really drives data to insights, to decisions, and so on. That includes some of the techniques like visualizations, machine learning, advanced analytics methods, and so on. That's in the digital environment. And the other critical aspect is the ability to have the critical thinking, as in problem solving, bringing some creative solutions, look at the demands of the day and find ways to create and innovate. I think that's perhaps another aspect of this education and the capability. And again, as an example, Doug mentioned this supply chain reconfiguration that happens on the fly because of what the situations that we are in. I think it gives opportunities for employees to think a little bit outside the box and come up with solutions and rapidly try out those kinds of solutions, right? So that's another aspect. And then of course the adaptability, in terms of working with teams, working with others, have that self-confidence in what we are doing. And that confidence comes from actually playing and putting your hands to the data and working with the models and so on, right? So these are some of the things that I see. And Doug?
So
Sure.
over to Doug. Thanks, Ramesh.
Sure.
Yeah.
From an education perspective, I think there are numerous educational opportunities. I think that we're all always interested in self-improvement, and Ramesh has a book on the back of his shelf. And I also have the same book on my shelf, Competing on Analytics, which is by Dr. Tom Davenport. And this is the book that I use in my course that helps to frame up what is analytics, how is it applied. A lot of the cases that I talked about are actually in that book. And as Ramesh and Murali have mentioned, I teach executives in a course called Business Analytics at SMU as part of an executive MBA program. So in addition to self-help and just reading up on the topic, I think that's a great place to start. There's certainly a variety of online courses that people can take either to develop skills, specifically for skill development. But I think, what SetConnect and I have tried to do in partnership with SMU is to craft a combination of certificate courses, of consulting courses, consulting-based courses, and even potentially all the way up to the full master's in data science program for practitioners. So I took my course at SMU and actually recorded it online, and the data science department wanted to share it with their students. And, that material is available to be repurposed for executives that are trying to learn about the concepts that I've espoused here today, like targeting opportunities, how do we build an analytics organization, how do we focus our analytics effort as an integrated part of corporate strategy with finance and functional departments. So basically all the things that I talked about today are based in, the Davenport text, are based in the course that I teach, the courses that Ramesh teaches. And I think that as a part of continuing ongoing professional education, whether that's through a certificate program or even a seminar or a capstone type of a project where a company partners up with a company like SetConnect or students at a university like SMU to work on projects together, or even if it's part of a degree program. If some of you on the call are going through an executive MBA program where there's an opportunity to take a course like the one that I outlined, I like to tell my students, and especially the target audience that's on the call today, as important as the techniques are, and as important as the math and the technology and the data is, the real crux of what you need to focus on is how to identify the problems and opportunities and decisions that drive the biggest value, and then how to frame those up in terms of how do I attack them with analytics. Do I have a problem that's stochastic or deterministic? Is the solution going to be predictive or prescriptive or a hybrid? And then we get into the techniques. But most importantly, how do I move the model from a sandbox into a production environment so that it runs in the background and we're constantly, continuously reaping those benefits. Those are the techniques that I and Ramesh teach, in our courses, because it's probably unlikely that the folks on this call are going to be the hands-on data scientists. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. It's really more a matter of how do I create a culture that's data-based and data-driven and model-driven. Two of my favorite case studies in leadership, W. Edwards Deming, the statistician that invented the field of quality control, basically helped Japan completely renovate their and create the auto industry. Used to say, without data, you're just another person with an opinion, right? And the modern day version of that is Gary Loveman, who was a professor at MIT, who went on to turn around Harrah's Casino, which is now Caesar's Palace and Caesar's Entertainment. That company was literally going into the tank. They had missed their numbers 10 years in a row. And he came in and completely turned the company around by refocusing the company away from high-end whales, which gamble a lot of money, but there aren't very many of them, focusing on mom and pop, grandma, grandpa slot players, and focused their organization to a revenue based loyalty program where we could actually put a value on every single person and know what they're worth to the company. That's a leadership case study that I teach in my course. And Gary Loveman said to his staff, don't tell me what you think, or don't tell me what you think. Don't tell me what you feel. Tell me what you know. Tell me what the data says and tell me what the models say, right? So there was a question in the chat that says, does emotion have no part in this? And I would say, gut instinct is a great thing, but in today's world, we can't rely on gut instinct and emotion alone. Gary Loveman took emotion out of the gambling business. He took the romanticism of Las Vegas out of the gambling business and applied a very analytically based, data-driven type culture and helped to turn that company around. And now it's a successful enterprise. But I think that it's important for leaders to continuously develop their skills through reading, not only reading texts, but seminars, certificate programs, maybe a course within a larger program, or even a degree, specifically in either data science or business analytics. That's my thought on that.
Thank you. As you know, I would find it hard to summarize this part because they have shared so much of their experience and what they do. I think it's in terms of skills as well as in terms of different ways of collaborating, working together. Doug, you also answered a question that one of the participants put across in terms of emotions and this thing and where business analytics stands. Thank you, both of you. Now I'll just turn to some of the, I know this can go on for hours and it's an extremely interesting and discussion. For the panel, there are a few questions that are coming through. You would have also seen it in the feed, in the chat. Yeah, there are 2 or 3 kinds of questions and I want very crisp answers to that because we don't have too much time, and that's a good sign often because we are so engrossed in it. So first is a set of questions that relates to data analytics and personal privacy. It's more about a philosophical kind of question, saying that while it's good, but a lot of our data is available and it's being, our personal privacy is being violated, etc., etc. That's one kind of question. The second question is a little bit about COVID and the VUCA world that we are living in. How does data-driven decision making, does it not clash with that? I mean, in the sense there's so much uncertainty and you're just talking about data. Is there a conflict there? How to deal with it? This is one question. The second question is about trends in data analytics for the next 3 years, right? And 2 very specific questions about oil and gas, oil industry and offshore, and augmented analytics tools for sales. I'll just pick up one by one. The first one is on data analytics and post. Either of you can pick it up, right? I don't think we'll have time, both of you, to answer that, right? So it's about data analytics and personal privacy, and data analytics in a VUCA world, right? Isn't there an inherent conflict? You're asking about data-driven decision making, whereas we're living in a very highly this thing. I would think maybe that's a good question to pick up. We're living in a highly dynamic environment. Everything is changing. So if we just go by data, aren't we sort of slowing ourselves down? And what data are we talking about? It keeps changing.
Would you like me
So,
to?
yep. Ramesh, who'd like to pick up? Yep, Doug. Sorry.
Clearly, that's a multifaceted question, and I'll try and address some of those facets. But clearly, there are protective laws that are being enacted, like GDPR in Europe, and we see this in the news every day. CCPA in California. My advice, as always, and I'm not speaking on behalf of Walmart right now. I'm speaking as an academician. But Walmart has policies in place, just like every company should, to protect consumer data and make sure that that data is secure and it doesn't fall into the wrong hands.
And that's the best answer we have at present, I guess. Yeah. So because you're not heard. Sorry. So please. Doug.
That's okay. Rule number one: follow the law. Right. That's rule number one. Rule number two is, while we want to exploit data for it's for business advantage, but it's also to the benefit of our customers. Some people are, I'll use the American phraseology, creeped out by what they call Big Brother. Maybe companies know too much about us. And there was a great article in Forbes not too long ago about a real world case study where Target, a major retailer in the US, was sending promotional items to a teenage young lady that they had determined through their algorithms and their data was most likely expecting a child. And her father intercepted that and called Target and said, "What are you doing sending my daughter this kind of information?" And it turned out the young lady was indeed, expecting. And I teach that as a case in my class. And, most people are taken aback by that and think, wow, that was overstepping, and that was overstepping the bounds of privacy and things. But the fact of the matter is, Target has all that data from, cash register and point of sale data, or loyalty program data, or if you enroll in certain programs or loyalty programs, they collect all that data. My advice to anybody in that circumstance is they should probably draw an age limit. They've got the age of the individual. Maybe they shouldn't be sending things below the age of 21 or 18, whatever. So my point is, there's a balance there. There's a balance between using the data to drive sales and customer service and provide our customers with the products that we believe that they may be interested in, but at the same time respecting,
their privacy and the personal information. I think that's the best answer we have at present, because this will continue. We'll keep testing limits. But thanks for giving that example of Target and this thing. I think it's about law on one side. It's about organizations themselves putting in some restraint and this thing. And of course, regulations are coming in now. It's an evolving process. I guess that's the best thing. Now, we don't have too much time. Just one question about trends in business analytics. There are two questions about sales analytics. I think we can just take it offline. Specifically, people have asked. So trends in business analytics over the next 3 years as applied to industry. So Ramesh, would you like to go on that? A very crisp answer from your side.
I think the trend will continue. I mean, we are seeing of course, the trend is geography based. In the US, I think the trend started several years ago, and that put pressure on universities to generate skills and talents to meet the significant demand from the industry, with people that have the ability to process data and bring that insight. And the classic data scientists or business analysts who also have the business domain knowledge, right? So from a talent perspective, that's a trend. And we are still continuing to see shortage of those kinds of skills, and that continue to be addressed. In the US, in the last 5 years, we went from about 10 universities offering graduate level business analytics programs to today, they're like literally 80 to 100 universities have taken on the route. And they're all pumping in these people with these kind of skills. Now, that's one side of the trend. On the business side, I think people are realizing. I mean, a lot of large corporations have realized, large and small, and in India particularly, I think it's an emerging trend. I recently had a conversation with head of a large consulting organization, global consulting organization. Their head, he basically said, in the next 5 years, this analytics in India is going to explode. It is already begun. It is going, the adoption and the use of analytics in organizations, it's going to explode. And so that brings the point that even in India market, that means there's more need for talent. There's more institutionalizing analytics within organization. And that trend is going to continue to explode,
Thanks for
as
that answer.
he concluded.
Okay, thanks for that answer, Ramesh. I think you've summarized it. It's going to only increase and explode. And I think in terms of both careers and entrepreneurs, and therefore there's a need for executives and entrepreneurs and even consultants to get a working knowledge of this. And especially people who are getting into careers now, there is no way out without looking at general MBAs and so on and so forth. Everybody and engineers have also started looking at it. I think that's the trend that we are witnessing. Thanks for your answer. It's been a great, I don't want to summarize anything because I think whatever the panelists have spoken is extremely valuable. It's available as a recording. There are 2-3 questions which we'll just take offline. One is about oil industry and offshore. Yeah. Another is about analytics tools for sales, right? And another one was about KPI metrics and analytics. So we'll just take it offline later, one-to-one. We'll do it offline.
Sure.
But right now, I would just request Professor Mani. Thank you both of you, Doug and Ramesh. Are there any good webinar will always evoke more questions, right? And hopefully, we should find a way of answering them either by partnering with BMA and coming to you with a series of webinars and series of offerings in the calendar year 2021. That's on the cards, and you'll hear about it. But right now, I just request Professor Mani to summarize.
Yeah, thank you, Murali. I think that was very well managed. I must confess this was more of a very, very well orchestrated evening. The questions flowed in and the responses seamlessly came in, which was evident from the rich experience both Doug and Ramesh have had over the years. It truly, on a Friday evening, nothing could have been so musical because so much of it flowed in as simple a manner that anybody could understand. I really think what you achieved this evening is demystifying the entire approach to business analytics and how one can look at it as an enabler for business success. Very often people believe that business analytics is like a magic wand. You just turn it around and then that's it. Hello. And lo and behold, we have succeeded. But I think the entire approach which you outlined step by step was indeed very, very interesting. Very, very thankful to both of you for having spent the Friday morning with us, which I guess is the difficult part as the week comes to a close. But sincerely appreciate all the efforts that you put in. I'm going to request one of our senior colleagues who's been an industry leader for over 40 years himself and still works as a consultant with Godrej, Mr. Indrapal Singh, who's also a past president of the Bombay Management Association. Indrapalji, would request you to make a few observations about this session and share your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Mani. I think you use an excellent word of orchestration or orchestrating by Mr. Murali, and I think superb panelists. I think in long time we are hearing such concise and clear exposition of the topic. So I think it's one couldn't have done anything better than attending this program to understand how businesses are getting managed in advanced economies, in kind of companies which are ahead on their curve, and so on. So I think business analytics, I must say, that's not so well appreciated yet at the board level. But like a consultant friend who told Ramesh that it's going to explode in the country. And I think that's superb. One particular area which I think one could make a pitch is the government, in the sense the amount of wastage that we have in various operations carried out by government. For example, our food storage and distribution. I think 1/3 of the food grains are destroyed every year. So demand forecasting of that, storage, management of inventory, like Southwest Airline manages its oil, etc. I mean, there could be huge learning and billions of dollars could be saved. So I think in India, the limit is, I think, beyond imaginable in terms of benefiting from business analytics, but it has to be sold. It has to be, we have to obtain the buy-in of the people, benefits have to be shown. Perhaps the road is little longer, but I'm sure it can benefit emerging economy like India a lot. So I would personally like to thank, I had kind of a BA 101 tonight, and I stand benefited from it. And I'll certainly propagate it at the forums where I'm connected with. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Indrapalji. That was a very passionate sharing of what we all experienced. And I think you almost read our minds when you shared the perspectives so willingly. What we request, Murali, is if you can leave a website address or an email address so that the learning can continue. We always believed in BMA that all good things come to a pause. We never believe they come to an end, because learning is a process that goes on and on and on. We'll of course share your contacts with those who seek to connect with you later on, but you're welcome to put into the chat box a simple connector message or an email ID so that people can reach across to you at the earliest. While that happens, I'm going to request my colleague on the executive committee, Chintan Oza, to please propose a vote of thanks on behalf of all of us present here on this call. Over to you, Chintan.
Thank you. Thank you, Murali ji. Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Rajesh. Definitely, this was indeed, thought-provoking session where we got to know that what the other side of the world and various use cases are benefiting by use of analytics. So, and the right, we are at the runway in India. And that is where I would like to say that earlier in the 90s, we had a situation wherein there were two set of people, one who were willing to learn computers and one who were not willing to learn computers. And we are in 2020 now, we again have two set of people who know the analytics, who would survive and thrive, and people who would avoid or would not learn analytics. So that is where the importance is. Unlike we learned how to operate computers, now is the time to learn how to analyze and then master analytics. Thank you so much for sharing the knowledge. And yes, definitely, Thomas Davenport's book is going to be my weekend read. Thank you. Have a great day and evening ahead. Thank you so much. Thanks. Over to you, Mani sir.
Thanks, Chintan. I think that was a nice way of suggesting how we could spend our weekend very meaningfully. But before we get on to that, here is a moment we all look forward to serve as a pleasant memory of this interaction with two very, very renowned stalwarts. But I must confess, really impressed with your simplicity and humility and the desire to share in as simple a manner as possible so that all barriers of misunderstanding were broken completely. Can we request all of us to put on our videos so that we can have a group photograph, though digitally, so that this stays with us as a memory of the good time that we spent together this evening with Ramesh, Doug, and Murali. And once again, thank you, Murali, for being the catalyst for this learning process. As suggested by you, we look forward to exploring how we could offer such programs on a larger scale, either through the BMA platform or similar such platforms where we can take this message to larger community of people who wish to know more about this dynamic area of business analytics. Allow Lakshmi and Oindrila, the efficient secretariat of BMA, to please capture this digital moment all together. Keep your smiles on. We are across 3 screens. So please have some digital patience, as we say, and give us that moment to capture this photograph, please.
While that's going on, Professor Mani, thank you very, very much. I think, and the BMA staff, I think it's been so smooth for us. It's been excellent, and the way it's been professionally managed. Thank you very, very much, and wishing you all these seminars. I think you're doing a fabulous BMA, and you are doing fabulous service. Wishing a long innings in this, right? Many more such seminars and webinars. That's a need of the art.
Thank you, Murali. And I hope you'll have seen in the chat box, Murali has put down his email ID and the website of SetConnect. Those
Yes.
of us who wish to reach across to them for further discussions, please do so. In the meantime, through BMA, we shall also send you an update of the various good work that they are doing. As we often do, within a week from now, you will also see on BMA's YouTube channel this entire video, so that those of us who missed it can still grab the learnings, and those of us who want to revise concepts as you would do in college before you write an exam, here is something which is available to you as a member service to the management fraternity from BMA. Once the link is up, we will keep you informed. So let the journey of learning continue, as we keep saying. Thank you, everybody. We are done with the group photograph. See it over social media over the next 2-3 days. Everyone, have a great weekend. Though we are moving towards unlock, please be safe, stay blessed, and Ramesh and Doug have a great weekday and a weekend ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.